Hi, I'm Ingo from Roast Rebels, and in this video we will talk about the different preparation methods of coffee, like washed coffee, naturals, what you have to look at when choosing your bean, and what you have to look at when roasting those beans. Before we deep dive into the preparation methods and how they affect the taste of the coffees, we have to understand what coffee actually is and why this preparation is necessary. So when we're talking about coffee beans, then this is actually fake news, because coffee isn't a bean. There are seeds within a coffee cherry. So coffee is grown at the tree in coffee cherries, and they look quite like cherries. They're a tiny bit smaller, maybe like grapes, but they have a red color. So the color is usually red. It can be dark red, it can be orange or yellow, but this is kind of the range of the color. It's quite similar to cherries, and also it has a quite sweet flesh. So you maybe know cascara, maybe you had cascara tea, which is quite sweet. So it's a sweet flesh around two seeds. Those seeds are a bit like peanuts, so they have a flat part which is looking towards each other. There are two seeds in one cherry. Usually, in about 5% of cherries, it's only one seed. And then you see this is the coffee bean is a bit smaller, is very round, and they are called peaberries. So you often find within your raw coffee or also your roasted coffees these small round beans. They're actually quite popular within coffee lovers because they bound a lot of sweetness, a lot of taste. So there are coffee lovers who are drinking peaberry coffee, which is really like only these small beans. But usually it's these two seeds, and each of these seeds has around it the chaffs, which all of you who roast coffee know, because the chaff is collected after the roasting process. And around that is also the parchment, which you shouldn't really know when you're a roaster, because the parchment is being removed from the coffee bean before shipping. But quite often you can see one or two of these little skins when you have a look at your raw coffee. It's this very hard, light brown or yellow skins that you sometimes find within your raw coffee. This is the parchment, which protects the seeds, and then around this is the pulp. At this stage, when the coffee is being picked from the tree, the seeds have about a 60% water content, and this has to be lowered until about 11%. So when the coffee is being shipped and is arriving at your roastery or your home roastery, it should have around 11% of water inside. So the change from being a seed within a coffee cherry until being a coffee bean with about 11% of humidity, of water content, this is actually the processing, and this can be done in different methods. So the most common are washed coffees or natural coffees. In washed coffees, what's happening is you put the coffee into a mill where the pulp is being removed, but there will be still some, it's called mucilage or honey, like a very sticky flesh around the coffee seed, which is still remaining. And you put the coffee then into water where some fermentation is happening, so that you can easily remove the rest of this honey. And then you have the seeds within the parchment, and you're drying them. They can be dried in machines, or they can be dried in the open air. And then on the other side, there is the natural process, where you take the coffee and you leave it. You don't remove the pulp, you don't remove the sweet flesh around it. You just put the coffee, either you dry them in machines, but usually you dry them on the floor, on a stone floor, or within drying beds where they're a bit up in the air, where some air is circulating. And then the coffee is being dried within this pulp until it's dry enough. Then the pulp is being removed mechanically and you have the coffee within the parchment. And the parchment is usually around the bean because it's protecting the bean up to the point where it's being shipped. So before shipping, the parchment is removed, the coffee is being screened, checked on quality and sizes, and then it's being packed in bags and shipped to your roastery or your home roastery. Besides of this, another common way is Pulped Natural or honey process, which you may have heard. And what is happening there is that the pulp is being removed from the coffee. Only the sticky, like this honey part, is left around the seeds, and then it's being dried. And then when it's dry, the honey flesh will also be removed from the coffee bean. And the motivation behind it mainly was to save water then for this fermentation process, but it also has a nice effect on the flavor, on the taste of the coffee, and I will talk about this in a second. But first of that, some very special kind of preparation methods that you sometimes hear. One is semi-washed or Giling Basah, which is happening in Indonesia, usually like Sumatra. And there the coffee is being dried until it has about 30% water content. And then the parchment is being removed and then it's being dried until it's around 11%. So you're removing the parchment a bit earlier. And what is happening there is the coffee is developing a taste which is quite unique for this preparation method. So the coffees have this herbal, have these sometimes a bit woody, earthy flavors, which some people like, some people not. So I recommend you to really try this kind of coffee. Some really love it, some say it's a defect. So have a look at it, try it. You usually can see it by eye because these coffee beans are darker. They have a kind of a gray-green color. And we also offer Sumatran coffee, and you can quite easily see how the color of this coffee is different from all the other raw coffees. And then within this third wave movement of coffee, where people are really interested in what kind of flavor can you get out of a coffee bean, people are experimenting. In addition to that, there are all these coffee competition where you always have to bring some news, some things or tastes that nobody had before. And within that, people are experimenting a lot with different fermentation methods. For example, since about 2 or 3 years, we talk a lot about this anaerobic fermentation, which has some tastes a bit like Fanta or Sinalco, like really, really sweet tastes. And I really recommend you can love this coffee or you don't, it doesn't matter. Just try this kind of coffee. Go to coffee festivals, and usually you'll find some coffee traders, some roasteries who offer different kind of coffees, who do cuppings. Just have a look at these cuppings, taste some different coffees so that you find out what you really like or what you don't really like that much. But I still owe you actually a taste profile that is coming out of washed or natural coffee. And what you can say is that the washed coffees, they're usually much clearer in taste. You can really taste the terroir of the coffee. Of course, it's really different depending on where the coffee is coming from, which kind of varietal it is, where it has been grown. So there you can really taste differences of the coffee seeds, of the coffees where they're coming from, much more than in naturals. But it's clearer. It has less sweetness. It often has more acidity. While natural coffees, they are sweeter, they are more round-bodied, and there you have quite an influence of the fermentation processes that are happening within this mucilage, this honey around the coffee. So you have an influenced taste, and you don't really taste the terroir that much anymore like in washed coffees, but you have a full body, you have less acidity, you have more sweetness. And in Pulped Natural or honey coffees, you have some in-betweens. So there the coffees often have still the characteristic of the coffee, of the terroir, but they're a bit sweeter, they're a bit more balanced, they're a bit less acidic. So that's why a lot of people also like these honey processed coffees. And then when it comes to roasting the coffees, it's actually more a decision on what you want to achieve or which taste profile you want to have with your coffee. Usually you take naturals when you want a coffee that is full-bodied, that is sweet. For example, for a typical Italian espresso, you usually have a natural from Brazil in it. While when you go for a really like an acidic V60 or AeroPress coffee, you're looking more for a washed coffee where you really taste then the difference of the coffee beans. And according to this is then also the roasting. So when you take naturals, you often want to pronounce the sweetness a bit more. Therefore, you prolong the roast process a little bit. You make the drying period a bit longer. You're a little bit slower around first crack, but you really have to take care, because what could happen when you make it too long is that the curve is breaking together, and then you get a baked coffee, which is absolutely not what you're looking for. Like these baked coffees, they have a taste of cardboard, they have a taste which is not sweet at all. So you really have to take care that you don't bake your coffee, just make it a tiny little bit longer. But actually even more important than that is the roast degree that you chose, because the roast degree can have quite an influence on how sweet your coffee is. So the sweetness is most pronounced between the first and second crack. If you're roasting a bit too light, too close to first crack, you have quite acidic coffees. If you go too dark, then after second crack, there is too much caramelization, which means there is too many sugars burned, so that the sweetness is really declining. So if you're looking for the taste profile where you usually use these natural coffees where you want to have sweetness, then rent the roast before the second crack. While on the other hand, if you're really roasting these washed coffees and you want to pronounce the terroir of the coffee, you want to have a very characteristic coffee depending on like maybe even the farm where they're coming from, then of course you're roasting lighter, because there you don't have these roasty tastes. It's much clearer. You roast faster with a bit more heat until a closer period after first crack. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you want to know more about roasting, then have a look at the other videos in this channel as well. Follow our channel, because we will publish some more videos on roasting, on roast techniques and roasting machines, on green coffee beans. And if you have any more questions, then never hesitate to ask me. I look forward to hearing from you. You'll find my contact on roasttravels.com.